We are live, ladies and gentlemen. 28 Pittsburgh Street in the heart of the, what is it? Nicest place in America, Columbiana, Ohio. Okay, did we finish Kennedy yesterday? Ladies and gentlemen, please tune in. So we watched Walter Cronkite's live airing of the news when they just got it, and then we watched the Zapruder film, right? You guys did all that, so both classes are caught up. Any questions on Kennedy? What are the two major issues going on in America in the early 60s? Trey. Two major issues in America. Two things that are overriding everybody's thoughts, because one of them's not the economy. A lot of times the economy is an issue when it comes to politics and history. But in this case, the economy's pretty good. So in the election of 1960, you notice that we didn't even really talk about the economy. We were talking about segregation and civil rights and the Cold War, which some people keep confusing. The space race is part of the Cold War. The Red Scare is part of the Cold War, right? So don't get those confused. Any other questions on Kennedy?
Nah.
What was JFK's wife's name? Because we didn't get into the whole mystique of the Kennedys. I don't know if you've heard of that before, but the Kennedys are associated with this word that comes from the days of knights. And anybody read this era of history? Camelot. That's the word that gets applied to JFK and his wife. What's her name? Jacqueline Kennedy. And they were like, they were young, good looking, and fun, right? So people looked at it like if you were a Democrat especially, and you voted for the guy, you'd be like, oh, isn't it so wonderful? Look at the family and how beautiful. And then when people would tell you that, well, it wasn't quite like you think it was, because then there would be rumors. Do you know about the rumors about JFK and women in general? Have you heard those? No? So you had this idea of Camelot because the beautiful couple, but then behind the scenes you've got like Marilyn Monroe, what? And supposedly many other women and JFK. Anybody ever hear about Marilyn Monroe and JFK? Like, does anybody even know who Marilyn Monroe was? Okay. The very famous actress who ended up dying at a very young age, and another thing that brings about a lot of conspiracy theories. How did this young actress die? Even to the point, one conspiracy that like President Kennedy might have had something to do with it because it was becoming public. She also, for you baseball fans, who did she also date? Joe DiMaggio. All right. Any other questions about Kennedy's? That we didn't cover the mystique part of it, the Camelot part of it, that added to his popularity. Remember when they said, we're going to Texas, we don't even know if they're going to like us. Well, by this time, even though Bay of Pigs went wrong and we had all these other problems, they were kind of like propped up as this like Camelot. What a beautiful scene. Ready to move on?
Yes.
Kennedy's unfortunately been assassinated. So his vice president, LBJ, is going to take over. And Lyndon Baines Johnson says, you know what? We're just going to continue doing what the man, JFK, was doing. Go ahead, Jake.
What happens to Jacqueline? Like,
She got remarried.
so like, does she stay in the White House or she
Try
just
it.
gone?
No,
I want to see it.
she'd have to move out of there.
It's for our own sake.
Like,
You got Lady Bird coming in. Lady Bird Johnson.
Now I feel
she doesn't have to do like anything with politics after that.
Did she have anything to do with politics?
I mean, she was first lady.
Not really. But she still became kind of relevant because, again, people had this attachment to them. Gentlemen, Jackie still became relevant in our society because people had such an attachment to the Kennedys. This affinity for them because they were young and beautiful. And then them being assassinated adds to it, right? People a lot of times become more popular when they die, especially if they die like that. Well, we're gonna talk about all this actually pretty soon. So the job is to finish what JFK had started. And we start with the 24th Amendment. Amendments are a big thing. How many amendments have there been to our Constitution? First of all, you should know that the country started with how many? We had the Constitution, and then we had how many added to it right away? Well, within 2 years. 10, right? We had the Bill of Rights, first 10 amendments. So since then, we've gone 230 years. And how many amendments have been added onto that? Only 17. This was an important enough issue that the country said, you know what? We need to pass an amendment which makes it a nationwide constitutional law for these people in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, these Arkansas, these southern states that keep passing laws to try to get around the 15th Amendment, that black people have the right to vote. So they keep finding loopholes. Well, guess what? We got to close all the loopholes. No more poll tax. No more extra tests that you give to people to keep them from voting. That is the 24th Amendment. Some people didn't want to pass the amendment because they said it didn't go far enough. Hey, we need to put more into this amendment because you know what they're going to do? They're going to try to find another loophole, right? These people that are set on not having the national government tell them how to run their state are going to find more loopholes. But it passed in 1964, just 2 months after JFK was killed. So right at the beginning of Lyndon Johnson. And then this is actually in our history notes because I don't know if you've been told, but this idea of the Beatles coming to America it kind of goes along with the popular culture that we kind of left out of the Kennedy administration and Camelot. They were like the prince and the princess. When the Beatles came to America, it's in your notes because it was a really big thing. This arrival in February of 1964 kind of begins, if you think about it, the kind of irrational, hysterical hero worship, idolatry that we have with entertainers. Does that make sense? I mean, it kind of started with someone mentioned Elvis a minute ago. Elvis was the first superstar entertainer. Like you had Babe Ruth, and people would go to a ball game and watch Babe Ruth, but they wouldn't be like, maybe it's because he wasn't as good looking. But when Elvis came along in the music industry, it changed everything. It was like the first generation where people were like, not just, hey, I like that person and I like their music, to this crazy sense of literally idolatry, almost worship, right? What's that tell you about what happened to our culture in the 50s and 60s? That generation after the Great Depression, after the greatest generation, the baby boomers that were born after the Depression and World War II, is where all this cultural craziness started happening in America that we're living with today. That we put these entertainers and athletes on such a pedestal and we go crazy. The video you're going to see was shot by two guys that were just following the Beatles. And to me, it's a very disturbing video to see, like, hey, there's people I would love to meet. Like when I was younger, my favorite quarterback, Bernie Kosar, when I got to go to Browns training camp and there's Bernie, I thought, hey, cool, there's Bernie. I want to go get a little closer to see him. But I wasn't like if I didn't see him, it was going to ruin my day, or I wasn't like about to cry because I saw Bernie Kosar. This video to me is alarming. And this was 50 years, 60 years ago almost. I hope you're alarmed. I mean, you guys don't think of like the baby like they thought of the Beatles, do you, Jake?
What?
You don't think of the baby like they thought of the Beatles, do
I
you?
mean, maybe. I do not.
Or maybe Lil Baby.
Maybe little baby.
Maybe Lil Baby. Do you know who the baby is, Ben? Good.
Scott is really like-
Wait, you don't know Lil Baby either? Good. Not you, Isaac.
What?
Huh?
Isaac would never. I would never. He would be so much better than he does.
All right. This begins. What do we call this period of time in American history when it comes to music and entertainment? The Beatles come in 1964, and then after them, there's going to be more and more musicians and bands coming over from England. It's called yeah, what's it called?
All I know is the British.
The British
Awakening.
Invasion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is called the British Invasion.
I got like the most conspiracy on That's funny, John. It's not funny. Great.
Okay, shh. This is a disturbing video. These young ladies are like they're gonna pass out. This is actual footage of when they're arriving at the airport in New York. Pretty quick, huh?
Although no one could be sure.
I can't even stand watching this lady. I'm sorry. It makes me like. My goodness. Elise, would you ever like act like that about another person? Do you think these people would have gone crazy if Christ would have walked around? I don't think they would. You one of these people? I saw the
Call one day from Granada Television in England. They said, and I started working together in 1960, 4 years before the Beatles film. My brother doing the sound and I doing the camera. They were right. This was a historical moment. These guys, the Beatles, they were almost like from another planet.
Like a military escort? Now, I know, I don't understand. Ladies, what am I not getting?
The art.
Which one is John Lennon?
Strangely, I was born at around this time, right? A little bit after this. So I kind of grew up with the Beatles, but I don't think I can pick them out like who's who, except Paul McCartney and John Lennon later. In this picture,
No.
I think Lennon's got the hat on.
Yeah.
McCartney's definitely in the back on the right. But George Harrison, Ringo Starr, I don't know which one's which. And I grew up with it, so I never understood it.
Along with the Beatles on that same plane were two guys who were out of television who were helping to produce the film. And they had some ideas that, of course, were kind of archaic. My brother and I have always been averse to interview people. We'd rather get information that is spontaneous, that's people experiencing something rather than answering questions. However,
Is that you, Caleb, jumping up trying to say?
it's not something whether it's appropriate to use it or something, so we're open-minded about it. 40 years have gone by now, and it's a good time to look at some.
I think she actually thinks they're coming there to see her.
It's just phenomenal that people would come to see this, and yet they wouldn't come and see the president. President Johnson came a few days ago, and then it's like I think we hear some reports of photographers. I figured what is so vital is the Beatles, and I see that there is nothing. It's just that people seeing them. I can see the music. It's just ridiculous. I'd rather listen to a jazz show any day. The thing is, well, but not the Beatles.
Oh, I like Paul. Anyway, Beatles invasion, British invasion, changing American culture in the 1960s. One of the things that probably helped along the popularity of the Beatles was the common every generation teenage idea that I love my parents and all, but I'm just going to try to do something different than they say. So the long hair, we're coming out of the 50s where short haircuts, and these kids come along with their long hair was seen as a sign of rebellion. So that kind of adds to it. That little bit of I'm doing something on the edge here. My parents probably wouldn't like that I'm doing this. Okay, enough of that stuff. Let's get back to the serious stuff. The Great Society. What would make a great society? President Johnson is speaking at that State Up North University, U of M. In May of 1964, and he announces this is his vision for America, the Great Society. That sounds good, doesn't it? What would be the Great Society? How would we create the Great Society? Anybody? It's interaction time. It's Friday, time to have some discussion about what we're doing in notes, not just sitting here writing notes. What would you rather have? A class where you just go in and write a lot of notes, or a class where you're like, hey, let's discuss what we're doing here? What would a great society look like? What was President Johnson saying? In 1964, he gives this speech, and in it he outlines what he would consider the Great Society. Before I put him up there, what do you think is going to be on there?
Freedom.
No. Maybe he just took that for granted. Yeah.
Unity.
Money.
No, maybe he just took that for granted. Probably something to do with money. What do you mean?
I know.
Is America the most prosperous country in the world at this time? Yes. Is everybody sharing in that prosperity? So, yes. Well, in his opinion, no. In a great society, wouldn't it be that a country with all of these things that we have and the prosperity, wouldn't a great society make sure that everyone gets to partake in that?
Oh no.
No?
I said, oh no.
So remember we said there was a switch in the thinking of Americans in the 1930s because things got so bad after the crash and with the Depression that you got to a point where evidently most Americans thought it was okay for the national government to step in and help because FDR got elected not once, not twice, not thrice, but 4 times. So there was an obvious from Herbert Hoover and Calvin Coolidge where the business of America is business and Herbert Hoover's idea like, okay, there's a crisis, but hey, we've been here before. We just got to let the system take care of it. Okay, we'll offer a little help, but obviously it wasn't enough to the voters because things were worse than they had ever lived through before or heard about in history. So they allowed the national government to spend more money in order to fix what was going on economically, right? Well, the Great Society, LBJ is going to take FDR's ideas, and this is my terms, put it on steroids. So now we're going to take this idea of Washington, D.C., the national government being the entity that comes in and saves people from whatever it is economically that's hurting them, and we're going to pull them out of that with a war on poverty. It begins with a war on poverty. We are going to eradicate poverty in the United States. By the way, have they? Let's careful with your answer there. Think about it. Has poverty been eradicated?
No.
You mean no? What is poverty? Besides the way you guys say it. You guys use it on like, it's like a sports team or something. Poverty. What's that? Homeless? Being broke and homeless. I'd say that's poverty, wouldn't it?
It's a good way to put it down.
What else?
Having no food.
Okay. How does someone get in that situation? Oh, sorry. How does someone stay in that situation in America? David. How does someone stay in that situation in America? Come on. Interact.
They're too.
Are there people that are homeless? Are they homeless because America has not afforded them an opportunity to achieve?
No.
Are they homeless because America hasn't spent trillions of dollars in the government having all of these programs and all of these workers, social workers that are there to, hey, if you're down and out in America, here's a program for you. So why is there still poverty? Yeah?
Wasn't it that like when Adam and Eve sinned, that God
Well,
was
yeah,
like,
go ahead.
Was that one of the things that God was like, kind of like part of, I forget what, like.
Well, like war will always be with us. There will always be people in poverty, right? It's kind of the human condition. That's true. But America is saying, hey, we can fix it. You're going into a whole new area where, yeah, America's view of how government works changed. And we're also going through a period of time in the 60s where the world view that you hear so much that we talk about, that we're trying to get back to, the truth, the worldview that you hear so much about, that changed in the 60s too. Because we didn't mention it, but in 1961, what happened? Prayer was taken out of public schools. So there's a shift in how people think altogether in America. There's a huge cultural shift. Which, again, why is the Beatles in your history notes? Because it's emblematic of the cultural shift that's happened. Which goes back to what Annie was saying, that, maybe it's a spiritual thing. Maybe America is so prosperous, and maybe we have done a lot of things in the 30s and then the 60s to eradicate poverty, but it's still with us. But why is it still with us? Is it with us because of economics, or is it still with us because of something else, David?
Maybe because when people are poor, they get money, so why would you work or anything? Because you have money.
So are you saying that there's an old saying that says, what's better, to teach a man how to fish or to give him fish?
Yeah.
Is that what you're alluding to?
Yeah.
So David's saying that when people get in a situation where they're in poverty and the government steps in and says, okay, here, we're going to help you, then maybe what Annie says about the human condition and human nature is, oh, if I can get by with not working, how many would have got up today and come to school if you didn't have to, besides Mackenzie? I kind of think you're serious, but I'm not sure, Isaac.
No,
Isaac says, yeah, I will, because I got to get my education. But, I mean, right? Wouldn't most of us kind of be like cats, just lay around, do nothing, we didn't have to?
nah.
So, if that's kind of human nature, we always just want to, or we're like electricity. Hey, just find the easiest path, right? We'll just do whatever is easiest. So David's saying that if we have all these government programs and they're designed to eradicate poverty, maybe they actually continue the cycle of poverty. That's a different way of looking at it. I mean, our goal is to eradicate it by having all of these government agencies and programs provide people with things so they don't in poverty anymore. But I guess my question is poverty an economic thing? Or is it a spiritual thing? Is it a mental thing? Why are people homeless in America? Why? Are people homeless in America because Americans say, you know what? You're down and out, tough, deal with it. Is that why they're homeless? Are there programs in place right now in America that if you're homeless, you go and they will give you what you need and not be homeless?
Yeah.
So why are they still homeless?
Some of it might have to do with pride, like
Hmm.
I got myself in this situation so I can get myself out, or like I'm a human and have my ego that I need to.
Yeah, I guess that, because that'd be a spiritual thing too, wouldn't it? That you can't overcome. Yeah, that's true for some people. Like, hey, I realize I made bad choices, and no one, there are people that get hard-hearted like that, or drugs, right? People's lives get totally over. You're like, man, how does that happen? Well, guess what? If you haven't been educated, that's what drugs do. That's why you just say no, and you don't do it once. The easiest way to quit smoking or quit drinking or quit doing drugs? They'll never start, right? So people get themselves in these cycles of behavior, whether it be drugs or pride or whatever. And it doesn't matter how much money we spend on this war on poverty, because it's been trillions, right? But yet you're saying we still have people in poverty. So obviously it's not a money thing. But there is an ideology out there, the socialist liberal ideology in America is that we can solve everything with money, that money will solve everything. They base everything on money. Education, hey, we'll just spend more money on education. What country would you say is out there that overall they do way better on education than America does? I knew you were all going to say that. Who do you think spends more money per student on education, America or China? I'm leading you to the right answer. What? You think it's China?
America.
America. Well, how's that? How is that? So is that a money thing or is it a cultural thing? Right. And it isn't because they're Christian, right? We know they're not a Christian nation, but they've got something, and it might even have to do with pride in the opposite direction. Like their pride is maybe, or maybe the same thing. Their pride is they would never want anyone to have to help them. So they've got this in their culture where it's just part of, oh, you know, of course, there's still going to be poor people in China. They're still human, right? But in general, in their culture, they would never want to be in a situation where they would have to take quote unquote handouts. So they're going to educate themselves and work. The work ethic that goes alongside with education is so much greater than ours. And David says maybe it's because when we put this great society together in the 60s with these good intentions, by the way, when you hear of all these liberal government programs, they're always with good intentions, right? You can tell somebody, don't you want poverty? Yes, I do. I don't want anybody to be living in poverty. I've got a love for my fellow man, and as a Christian, I don't want anyone to be hurting, or so I want to help all I can. But what's the proper way to do it? Is it to just keep spending money and giving them fish, or do we need to change the culture? You with me? So what are we gonna do to change the culture, Bella? It's it's gonna be hard for you to turn around this culture that you're living in and not just give up hope and say it's hopeless. No, it isn't. It can be turned around. But we have to have your generation say, you know what? We've been doing this all wrong for the last how many years? 100 years. And maybe it has more to do with recognizing who we are as fallen people and going back to something so basic as, you know what, if America would just turn back to God, maybe a lot of this stuff would be taken care of, like poverty and crime. Do people commit crimes because they're poor? Wait, only poor people commit crimes? Are there poor people that don't commit crimes? Well, one political ideology in the country likes to argue that the reason there's high crime is because there's high poverty or there's high unemployment. Is that necessarily true? Do statistics say that where you have high unemployment and poverty, there's higher crime? Yeah, they do. They do. But why? So someone will take that. Remember, there's lies, there's darn lies, and then there's. Haven't tell you guys that yet? Oh. There's lies, there's darn lies, and then there's statistics. So you can take statistics, and depending on how you present them, you can get people to go along with what you believe or what you want them to believe. For instance, let's take right now, relating it to present day. The current president could have the audacity to stand before the people and say, hey, these are the statistics. We've increased employment, and all of these millions of jobs have been so to speak, created by the government policies. Wait a minute. Did everybody forget already that in 2020, we absolutely leveled the economy. The government forced companies to shut their doors. So all these people are out of work. Well, the president can go before the people and give this statistic. We've had the greatest job growth in the history of the country. Guess what? It's true. Guess why it's true? Because you took the economy that was the greatest in our history in 2019 and you totally leveled it. You shut everybody's business down. Everybody was out of work. They were sitting home collecting money from the government. And then when you open it back up, when everybody goes back to work, guess what happens? Guess what gets counted in the statistics? That they went back to work. And they say it with a straight face.
I love those evil.
Crazy. Wow, that turned into a UTT class instead of history. Good job.
I should try to make me so angry.